Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has issued a stark warning: Ukraine does not trust Russia. This statement, while direct, reflects the deep-seated distrust that has plagued relations between the two countries for decades. Zelenskyy's warning comes amidst reported progress in ceasefire negotiations, a glimmer of hope in a brutal conflict. However, the Ukrainian president remains skeptical, pointing to a long history of broken promises and agreements. The distrust between Ukraine and Russia is not new. It is rooted in a complex history marked by conflict, annexation, and broken treaties. From the Holodomor, a man-made famine engineered by the Soviet regime in the 1930s, to the annexation of Crimea in 2014, Ukrainian history is scarred by Russian aggression. These historical wounds run deep and continue to shape the present-day relationship. Zelenskyy's caution is understandable. He is acutely aware of the human cost of this conflict, having witnessed firsthand the devastation inflicted upon his people. He knows that any agreement, any ceasefire must be built on a foundation of verifiable trust. Words alone are not enough. The international community has a responsibility to support Ukraine in its pursuit of a just and lasting peace. This includes holding Russia accountable for its actions, providing humanitarian assistance to those affected by the conflict, and working to ensure that any ceasefire agreement is robustly monitored and enforced. Despite the deep mistrust, there have been some glimmers of hope in recent weeks. Reports suggest progress in ceasefire negotiations, raising the possibility of a pause in the fighting. The details of these negotiations remain closely guarded, with both sides reluctant to reveal too much information. However, even these tentative steps towards peace have been met with skepticism. The history of this conflict is littered with broken ceasefires, agreements that have quickly crumbled under the weight of renewed violence. The 2014 Minsk agreements, for example, were intended to bring an end to the fighting in eastern Ukraine. Yet, they were routinely violated, and the conflict continued to simmer. The challenge now is to translate these initial steps into a lasting peace. This will require more than just a cessation of hostilities. It will require a fundamental shift in the relationship between Ukraine and Russia, one built on mutual respect, dialogue, and a commitment to peaceful coexistence. The international community has a vital role to play in supporting this process. This includes providing mediation and facilitation, ensuring that both sides are held accountable for their commitments, and helping to create the conditions necessary for a sustainable peace. Even as ceasefire negotiations inch forward, reports of continued fighting cast a long shadow over the peace process. Russian strikes on Ukrainian cities, targeting civilian infrastructure and residential areas, have only deepened the distrust between the two sides. These attacks serve as a stark reminder of the human cost of this conflict and the fragility of any ceasefire agreement. The targeting of civilians and civilian infrastructure is a clear violation of international humanitarian law. Such acts constitute war crimes, and those responsible must be held accountable. The international community cannot stand idly by while these atrocities continue. These attacks underscore the urgent need for a robust ceasefire monitoring mechanism. Such a mechanism must have the mandate and the resources to independently verify compliance with the ceasefire agreement and to investigate any alleged violations. The continued fighting also highlights the importance of addressing the root causes of the conflict. This includes finding a lasting solution to the status of Crimea and the Donbas region, as well as addressing Russia's security concerns in a way that respects Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Moving forward, the path to peace in Ukraine hinges on two critical elements: robust verification mechanisms and sustained international pressure. Any ceasefire agreement to be effective must include rigorous and independent monitoring to ensure that both sides are adhering to their commitments. This requires the deployment of international observers with a clear mandate to investigate any alleged violations and to report their findings transparently. Equally important is the need for sustained international pressure on Russia to end its aggression and to engage in good faith negotiations. This includes maintaining and strengthening economic sanctions, providing Ukraine with the military support it needs to defend itself, and holding Russian leaders accountable for war crimes. The international community must remain united in its condemnation of Russia's actions and in its support for Ukraine's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and right to self-determination. A just and lasting peace can only be achieved through a combination of diplomacy, deterrence, and an unwavering commitment to upholding international law and human rights.